Hello, everyone. Welcome to Right at Home 2021 Virtual Forum, Building MH Industry Resilience. We're going to get started in another minute, so take this time to grab a cup of coffee, a snack, and make sure that you're ready to participate with us for the next 90 minutes. Hello again, and welcome to Right at Home 2021 Virtual Forum, Building Manufactured Housing Industry Resilience. Before we get started with today's webinar, I do want to go over a few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and will be made available to registrants via email within the next week. All webinar attendees are muted to ensure sound quality. But you are able to ask a question or share your thoughts at any time by typing into the text box of your GoToWebinar control panel. If you experience any technical issues, please email gotomeeting@prosperitynow.org. You also have the option to be unmuted and ask a question verbally. So make sure you set your audio option to phone call, use the dial-in number, and enter your audio PIN. The dial-in number, access code, and audio PIN are in the audio table of your control panel. If the control panel is closed, click on the arrow icon to expand your view. And to be unmuted and join the conversation, click the raise hand icon and we will unmute you. As many of you know, Prosperity Now has hosted the I'm Home network for a couple of decades now and has taken action on a number of federal, state, and local policies. And we've supported various partners as they provide expanded access to financial products, increased manufactured housing supply, and increased ownership opportunities for low and moderate income households not able to enter the mainstream housing market due to unnecessary barriers. We've also hosted a conference about every year, and this year we are hosting this virtual forum. You can see the schedule on your screen. Today is our final day of sessions. Right now you are in Building a More Resilient Manufactured Housing Industry, and later on today we will host Reimagining the Future of Manufactured Housing. The two that we hosted yesterday, if you were not able to join us, the recordings and PowerPoints from those webinars will be up on our website in a matter of days. And we'd also like to thank our sponsors, NeighborWorks, America, and Wells Fargo for their support in helping us put on this great forum. Today we have some great speakers. Chris Nicely, president of manufacturedhomes.com, Ramsey Cohen, retail marketing manager of Clayton Homes, Ross Kanaga, Financial Innovation Manager, Deb N.W., and Sarah Grecki, Principal, SSG Community Solutions. So I will now hand it over to Chris.
All right, I appreciate it, and welcome everyone. Hope you get a lot out of the next hour and a half, and we're excited to share that with you. What my role is I'm going to level set what was happening within the industry prior to the pandemic, and then the panelists are going to talk about all kinds of things that have been going on, the innovations, the shifts, and everything along those lines, so that we can kind of look at what manufactured housing is going to be and what carries over from pandemic and become permanent fixtures within the industry. So I'm pleased to be with you. I'm Chris Nicely, president of manufacturedhomes.com. We are a digital tech firm out of California that specializes in factory-built housing. So we're delighted to be here with you. And with that, let's get started. Next slide. You know, I want to do the Wayback Machine, and I want to take us back to the early 2000s and kind of talk about what was the industry like back in 2000. And it was pretty traditional, kind of exactly the way the industry had been for the last 30 years prior to that. So we had 7,500 retailers, and in the business we call them street retailers, and they are the typical setup that you would expect. You have a front office, you have inventory, anywhere between 10 and some dealers even had 50 homes in inventory in their back lot, and they relied on walk-in traffic, a local market. Typically they would be in a market 20 miles in diameter, 20, 30 miles of diameter in a lot of parts of the country. A good store would sell between 40 and 50 homes a year, for a month. And if you were selling 4 homes a month back in the early 2000s, it was an extremely profitable store. There was limited retailing in the community side of the industry. Typically, a community owner would rely on that local retailer to populate those empty lots within the community and then sell those to people that either didn't have land or couldn't afford land, or were interested in living in that community. So the model was a lot different 20, 21 years ago than it is today. And because of the evolution of digital technology, as you can imagine, even though we take it for granted sometimes today, back in 2000, there was a very limited digital footprint in the marketplace. So it was far different than what we found today. Then 2008, 2009 came, and prior to that, the industry was building somewhere between 250, 350,000 homes a year. And the crash came, lenders were held accountable, many lenders went out of business, and the industry suffered, as all industries suffered back in 2008, 2009. And what was at one time 7,500 retailers decreased to 3,500 or less. So the um, the retailers that were in and they were great at selling, but not so great at managing their business, when the demand started to dry up, quite frankly, the people that knew how to run businesses stayed in business. The people that were sales machines thinking tomorrow was going to cover all sins went out of business. So we went from 7,500 retailers down to 3,500 retailers. Communities had empty lots. They ended up becoming a direct outlet for manufacturers. Manufacturers recognized that these lots were potential home sites for people and families, and began to market their homes directly to community owners and managers. So, and today that's become quite an important part of the industry for manufacturers and others. And those community owners started selling their own homes. They had better control of their residents and who came into the communities. They had better control of pricing. Quite frankly, community owner would price a home less than a retailer simply because they were interested in the long-term return of a resident. And as you would expect, lending tightened. So with the crash of lenders and the loose regulations, the loose underwriting that were with lenders in the early 2000s, really tightened up, really became regulated because of some of the poor practices in lending prior to 2008 and 2007. So number of shipments fell from 250, 350 at the top, recent top, of the shipments down to less than 50,000 units. Unfortunately, as a part of that, what you saw were factories that closed, manufacturers that went bankrupt, other manufacturers that had the wherewithal and were good business people to buy up some of those assets. And ultimately, a very few manufacturers were building those 50,000 houses. 20% or even less, 15% of what was being built in 1999, 2000, 2001. So dramatic change happened in that financial crisis. Repos, as you can expect, repos began to build. I remember driving past fields and fields of repos that were sitting in the field waiting for their next owner. And ultimately, it took years to work through that repo inventory. Next. Next. Then 2015 to 2020, the recent, during the last decade, there was rebuilding, innovation went on. It was an exciting time to be in manufacturing. There was considerable automation in the factory because labor became, quite frankly, a scarce commodity. So the material handling, the repetitive, patterned type of production was automated to a greater degree, and that innovation carries through today, and it sets a standard, a quality standard that is far above what it was 20 years ago. There's However, even though the market continued to grow very slowly, there were few new entries into the marketplace. We didn't see a lot of non-big name, we in the industry we'd call it the big three. We didn't see a lot of smaller manufacturers and lenders come into the space, quite frankly, because I think some of the stereotypes that were there, and site building was starting to really recover, and that's where a lot of the attention was given. Then in 2015, really a great thing for affordable housing, a great thing for factory-built housing. The GSEs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, got involved with manufactured housing as a part of their duty to serve task given to them by Congress. And one of the three main elements of the platform for duty to serve was become involved in manufactured housing and help it grow. And through Fannie and Freddie's support of new programs, of recognition, the validity of factory-built housing, the industry itself became recognized for the product that they manufactured, they built, and the innovations that were going on, using the same materials as site builders, looking at an engineered production and when I give a speech or talk on manufactured housing, I talk about every home is wind tested at 70 miles an hour because it's pulled down the freeway or highway to the home site. And typically a site built home, given that same wind load, would fly apart. So in itself, it's structurally very sound, and it was recognized as a part of the affordable housing options in the future. So that was pretty exciting. Shipments increased 94,000, but the underlying current, what was happening is everyone was watching this millennial market. And they were saying, okay, the millennials, they're forming households much later. They're waiting later to get married. They're waiting later to have children. And therefore, the apartment construction industry boomed, and the housing still languished, still growing, but still languished. At the same time, the boomer market, which had supported the housing industry for decades, the boomer market started to decline. Once upon a time, it was 76 million or so, 75, 76 million boomers in the marketplace. It's down significantly less than 70 million today. Millennials coming into the market right now, number about 85, 88 million by some counts, and even higher. And there was this undercurrent of uh, housing demand that was getting ready to explode. Right now, 37% of millennials are in a home ownership situation. Far higher degree of millennials are able to buy a home if they so desire, and so everybody felt great. 2019, everybody was feeling good. Housing was going, the economy was rebounding. Shipments were up to over 90,000, almost 100,000 strong. But there was still this situation where there were limited new entries, limited innovation in the industry. So we were all kind of waiting for the millennial markets, and some were starting to innovate. Some were looking at, we're going to get hit with this high demand and we don't have the capacity to meet this high demand because the plants we had open to produce 350,000 units, many of those have closed. We don't have labor to open them back again. And it's going to be, who knows, another decade before the millennials really throw power into the industry. Then we all know what happened in 2020. Next, yep, 2020, bam. We have an import from China that no one wanted. COVID-19 put a stop to almost everything we were doing because we didn't know what we didn't know. And it was interesting. Prior to being with manufacturedhomes.com, I was with Next Step, and we did a survey of manufacturers early in 2020, April of 2020, and from the manufacturers, they told us they expected that their shipments would be down 30 to 40% or more in 2020. And for a couple of months, that's the way it looked. April, May, it looked pretty dire. And the retailers had changed the way they're doing that. Ramsey's going to talk about that in a minute. But it all of a sudden changed for us. And the old paradigm, the status quo, the routine, the way we used to do everything had to change. If the true business and housing individuals in the factory built housing were going to remain, they had to reinvent the product, the process, and the home buying way to do home buying itself. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ramsey. And Ramsey, what in the world has happened in the last 18 months, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris, and thank you so much for having me here, everyone. Yeah, so I think we have to ask ourselves about how can we as an industry build resiliency, right? It's the topic here at hand, and one of the things that stands out to me most when pondering that question is how much are the challenges that we are facing today different from the ones that we faced before the pandemic? I would submit that they're not fundamentally different than they were before. There are still a lot of very similar challenges as before COVID. There's a low affordable housing inventory in our country. There's a high demand for affordable, attainable housing nationally. We still see construction delays. And now you add on top of that post COVID, this inflation of material costs. There's a greater need for access to affordable housing here in America than really ever before. In my mind, offsite construction and manufactured housing are the solution to addressing these problems around efficiencies and getting costs down. I think there are a few things that we can do as an industry to build towards a greater success, greater future. In particular, I think it's going to be overcoming the stigma of the quality and durability of offsite construction. We need more education and buy-in from the media and from government officials. We need to think about ways that manufactured housing can be used for urban infill and work to replace some aged units and products out in the field with new, better homes that we know are more energy efficient and are much more durable than the older existing product. We also need to work together to fight to have manufactured housing treated on par with site-built. We have a lot of opportunity around increasing the availability of financing programs. I think Ross will be better equipped to speak to things like that. And working to ensure that we're allowing manufactured homeowners to build equity and to keep pace with other homeowners in the country. I believe it was FHFA recently stated that manufactured housing appreciates at the same rate as traditional site-built construction. That's the kind of thing that we as an industry need to lock arms and go forward and tell and ensure more and more people outside of our industry understand that. If you look at the picture on the screen now, I think that actually speaks very much to the opportunity at hand for us to build resiliency, and it's by growing the number of people who should be considering manufactured housing and off-site construction as a viable and good housing solution. There are a number of studies that show that if we were able to add a porch, a garage, the number of people who are interested in buying a manufactured home increases considerably. Goes from something like 10% of the population up to 34, 40% of the population. And so I think that the next thing that we wonder is, what can we do to address another pandemic or something else, whatever it is that's around the corner. In my mind, there are two key areas that we as an industry can focus on. First and foremost would be innovation. And that can have a few different looks, right? That can be our home building innovation, that's growing our ability to produce product and to do so in an effective, cost-effective way. And that can be integrating things like robotics to assist in the construction of our homes so that we can increase our output at our building facilities so that they're working more efficiently and effectively. It can also look like growing our efforts around panelization. There's an opportunity for us as an industry to increase the speed and efficiency of how we're building both our on-site and off-site built homes by using panelization. That would really look, in my mind, a lot like shifting our industry from its current makeup or the way things have been traditionally, as Chris sort of spoke to there, and into a model that looks a little bit more like a auto manufacturer or the airplane industry, where things are assembled in parts and pieces. That would also allow us to be more assemblers rather than builders at each individual step in the process. But there's also a lot of opportunity around product innovation. As I mentioned before with the image on the previous slide, the number of people who are willing to consider our homes, I think I may have misspoke earlier, but it's 10% of the population would consider manufactured housing. But if we add a porch, we add a garage, that increases up to 46%. And so it means adopting new innovative products like the CrossMod home that's recently been out. And it means new innovative financing solutions for products like CrossMod. Fannie and Freddie have both rolled out new financing options. I think through those efforts around increased innovation, both on the building side and in terms of the financing solutions and how we present our product, are going to create a lot of opportunity for us to be more resilient to withstand whatever next storm we all have to weather together. I think the next thing that can really help us by building resiliency is going to be our sustainability. Here at Clayton, we recently hired a director of sustainability who's going to be helping us track year over year our carbon footprint and our impact on the environment. We're going to be working to create better and better, more energy efficient homes. And as we do that, we're also going to be creating a greater desire for those homes, building value and equity for our customers as they purchase those homes. And the more we have these great energy efficient homes, the more we will be able to go back and shift those perspectives in the media and for government officials and those who are outside of our industry. I also wonder, is there something positive that our industry can do as we come out of COVID-19 and as we continue to rebound from this. And I think that can have a few different looks. One, I think we all had to take a good hard look at what we were doing in terms of safety. I think now the idea of safety and how close we interact with others and that sort of thing has all changed as a result of COVID-19. So implementing good health protocols outside of general safety, like ensuring you're strapped in and have a hard hat and that sort of thing in our building facilities, it's now following things like CDC guidance so that we can ensure good, healthy team members as they're working in our facilities and building these new homes. There's also an opportunity for us to increase our quality of experience in terms of the digital atmosphere that customers engage with. That means building opportunities and creating opportunities for customers to explore, shop, become familiar with our product or with our industry in a way that is from the comfort of their own home. So it's building out robust digital experiences, leveraging tools like Matterports and 360 video tours, creating opportunities for people to text and video call or online chat with their home consultant or the person helping them purchase their home. It's going to be meaning that we're going to need to meet people where they are in terms of their shopping habits and their buying behaviors. So there's a number of different things that we can do to continue to build our resiliency and to grow. In the next 10 years, our building facilities are going to be producing 50% more homes because they are going to be moving away from this model where we are currently building everything in one spot and shifting more towards panelization and to that assembly rather than building directly. Look, for instance, Clayton has recently opened up a new panelization factory, their Westmoreland facility, and they've already participated and helped build 270 site-built homes by using this panelization approach. That helps us reduce build times from 175 days down to 60 days. And so I think the more we can do to focus on driving value for customers, whether it's through energy efficient homes and energy efficient building practices, or through being faster at meeting the demand for affordable housing, or it is a matter of being able to source great materials so that we can continue to tell the story of manufactured housing and ensure that more people outside of our industry know and understand the value that manufactured housing brings and the solution that we offer to solving the problem of attainable, affordable housing here in the country, the better. And so again, I think that's really twofold. It is a matter of us pursuing new innovative ideas on nearly every front, while also focusing on sustainability, both in terms of our construction and for our industry long term.
Let me ask a question, Ramsey. You talk about panelized, and that's not really something new in home construction, but new in the manufactured housing. Excuse me. Are those homes going to be built to a HUD code, IRC, or are we looking at a future where whatever code it's built to really doesn't matter as long as it meets a code for residential construction? How important are codes going to be moving forward for the home builder?
Well, I think codes are always going to be paramount in terms of importance. And thank you, Chris. It's a great question. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, that it's going to be moving to meet a code. And I think what those look like and how we develop products and solutions is going to be different because I think we're going to need to work together as an industry to change some of the codes and change some of those perspectives. And as I mentioned, there's I think a opportunity for us as an industry to go forward and talk about the solutions that we can provide. I think there's a lot of stigmas and ideas about what our industry is, what manufactured and offsite construction are in terms of durability and quality. And so I think codes are going to need to change and develop and become modern and catch up with the products that we have, especially as we continue to develop new innovative solutions that weren't previously thought of.
Good. That's good. I think we need to be innovative in our regulations as well as in the way we construct homes and provide housing for people in general. What other things do you see from the supply side of it? What is the threat, I guess, if you want to talk about threats? What's the threat from offshore construction, panelized, erectable homes in a matter of hours or days, and those type of people that are organizations, companies that are coming in, exposing us? You know, we hear things from IKEA. The old days when Sears catalog, you could buy a home through Sears catalog, have it shipped to you. Are we going back to that type of environment, or are we seeing new entries that are putting brick and mortar together, factories together here in the United States, creating jobs and creating a different product than maybe what's done even 30 years ago? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I don't think we're going to go back to mail order homes, similar to the Sears Craftsman. I would say that building methods have largely not changed in the last 70 years, right? And there have been a lot of companies who have tried to enter the space, attempting to bring in these new innovations in terms of home building. We as an industry have always been out in front of everyone else in terms of affordability and attainability, and efficiency and effectiveness of our building process, and that puts us in a position where we are uniquely qualified to grow that even further. We're at the forefront and have the opportunity to lead the way in terms of innovative building solutions. A lot of these businesses, I think, could be inexperienced startups that offer a more complex product that's going to take time for them to gain market interest. And then, you know as well as anyone else, Chris, that time from market interest to actual sales can be even longer. And so I think our ability to blend the traditional manufactured housing construction process with new things like panelization that allow us to increase efficiency and speed through the manufacturing process leave us as an industry uniquely positioned to lead the way and fend off any exterior challenges that might exist for us, while at the same time creating an opportunity for us to continue to tell the fantastic story of our solutions for affordable and attainable housing here in America.
Yeah, it's exciting. You alluded to it earlier in your presentation that typically factory built housing, particularly HUD code housing, is accountable for about 8 to 10, maybe sometimes as high as 12% of all housing. Do you see a future where factory built housing could account for 30-35% of home building?
I certainly, I'm an optimist to a fault, Chris. So absolutely, I see that. I think it's going to be necessary for us to increase that. We cannot, and that's not just from my perspective as someone who's worked almost his entire professional life in the industry. That is looking at our country and the challenges that we are faced with. I do not foresee a way for us to offer people the American dream of home ownership and being able to afford that dream of home ownership without manufactured housing playing an extremely pivotal and key role in that opportunity and creating the opportunity for more and more people to have home ownership. It is difficult for me to envision a way that we don't move in that direction. So I don't, 30 would be fantastic. I'd love to see the industry grow like that. But I think the important thing is that we grow out of the need to serve the country and the people of our country by offering fantastic, durable, quality, energy efficient homes at an attainable price that simply can't be found outside of our industry.
Yeah, I think back, and certainly not in my lifetime, glazing windows on site for the homes that were going to be built on a piece of land. But certainly recently we talk about pre-hung doors, trusses, floor joists. Those type of components are being built in a factory and are delivered to the home site for that home builder. And we forget about the fact that those used to be built on site with local labor as well. And now those components are built in a factory, delivered to the home site to be integrated into that site-built home. Real quick, last question from me, and then we may have some from the audience. And I invite you, please, to raise your hand or send an inquiry in. But do you see large components? We've talked about things like wet core and the garages and things along those lines, big pieces of a site-built home that could be delivered already finished to their engineered specifications. Is that possible anywhere?
I certainly think it is, and I think approaching every challenge and opportunity that we have as an industry with the idea that anything is possible is going to be key to our growth and long-term sustained success. So yes, absolutely, I think anything would be possible. I think we may have questions from the audience, it seems like.
Good.
Yes. So the cost of manufactured housing has increased due to material surcharges and inflation protection charges. As such, we're losing some of the economies of scale when developing scattered lots. Do you see a decrease in manufactured home prices, or will we keep seeing prices increase in the short/long term?
Yeah, I'm not an economist. I would not trust too much of what I would be able to say in terms of long-term or short-term pricing. It's a fantastic question. I think it's something on everyone's mind. So I really appreciate the question. I would say that right now, the perspective seems to be that the cost of housing, for all the reasons that were so eloquently listed in the question, is going to be impacting not just manufactured housing, but everyone. And so I think that's where it becomes key for us to continue to leverage things like panelization and other innovative building solutions, becoming more efficient and sustainable in our building practices, so that if the cost of housing continues to increase, we are increasing at a smaller, lower rate than site built, so that we can continue to try to drive down that cost and offer an affordable, attainable solution for people, so that we can keep that spread between the cost of a new typical site-built home versus a new off-site constructed home.
Awesome. Another question that we have is, what does the industry need to do to attract the talent needed to build a sustainable workforce to support the growth in manufactured housing based on the growing affordable housing gap in our nation?
And that is a fantastic question. Thank you so much for it. I think it means making great working environments for those people. It means making sure people have the opportunities to take care of themselves and take care of their families and provide and give back to the communities in which they support and live. And so I think it's a matter of creating as quality and great of a environment to work in, and great place to serve, and this great need that we have in our country. I think that's how we recruit the best talent. I'm an optimist, and I firmly believe everyone wants to give back and do all that they can to take care of people. And so I would say that the opportunity extends beyond just simply the day-to-day working environment or your compensation. I think it behooves us as an industry to make sure that the people we're bringing in, whether they are building homes, selling homes, whatever stage they are in the process, that we keep at the forefront of our thoughts in all that we do each day, the important and good work that we're doing. That if you're, whether you're, someone working for a lender or you're, putting shingles on a roof, you're a part of helping build the American dream and create a home for someone that without your efforts and work may not have one at all.
It's interesting too, Pam, if I could just interject, the state associations, and almost every state has a state manufactured housing associations. Many of those recognize the need for labor in all kinds for our industry and other industries. Many of those are establishing programs with trade schools, high schools, and others around the country in order to present the options of in manufactured and modular housing for jobs and careers. So I'm excited here, and
Yeah,
they just turned the
testament to the
lights out.
sustainability here. Yeah, sorry.
Exactly. So there's a lot of activity and conversation and actions going on right now nationwide to try and present the opportunities for stable employment that is at market rate or higher, and you have benefits and other things in a factory built situation that you do not have on a site built situation. So sorry about almost like sound like a commercial there, a recruiting commercial, but there's a lot of things happening on a state level, and I think we'll see more movement towards internships and trade school training and that type of thing, and people finding careers in factory built housing. So I'm really excited about the future for our younger generations as well. Pam?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Chris, can you take us to our next speaker? Go ahead, Ross.
Okay, I'll just get started. Hey, thank you everyone. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Ramsey. Very interesting observations. I hadn't heard about that porch garage study. Very interesting. My name is Ross Kanega, and I work with Dev Northwest, and we're a community economic development nonprofit, and we're one of a handful of HUD housing counseling agencies and home ownership centers in the state of Oregon. Our organization does both advocacy, policy work at the state level, but we also maintain our roots, which is, first-time home buyer education and first-time home buyer counseling, and of course, manufactured and factory-built education and counseling is becoming a bigger piece of that. What I plan to share with you today is first kind of some boots on the ground observations that we've seen around manufactured housing in our first-time homebuyer classes and counseling, especially this last year during the pandemic, and then really turn our attention to the efforts that we're doing on a statewide level with the state and other partners around advancing manufactured housing replacement program, and specifically our role in that kind of matrix as a housing counseling agency. I just want to echo a lot of the things that Ramsey said, is that like as a housing counseling agency, like we have very similar goals that what Ramsey spoke about is we see low inventory, we see a greater need for affordability, and really offsite construction is a big piece of that. Specifically in the West Coast, and this is true of course across the country, as prices for site-built homes have increased, we've really seen it, in this pandemic year become so much more inaffordable for many low-income, moderate-income, and even middle-income households to afford what they're looking to do. And so there really has been a lot more interest in manufactured homes, factory-built homes. Specifically, we're seeing a lot of people in classes asking questions, not just about manufactured homes, but about purchasing land. They want to get out. It's just too expensive in all of the city areas in Oregon, and so they want to get out, and they know that manufactured housing could be a piece of that. While interest is growing, we still are hearing those common misconceptions that are holding people back from considering factory-built homes when it really could be the optimum choice for them. And that's of course where the one-on-one home ownership counseling plays a big role. I believe Sarah is going to talk a little bit more about it, but the common questions we're hearing are, but I hear it doesn't appreciate in value, but questions about quality of construction. I know these are all things that everybody on this webinar know are absolute false, and as a collective, we're working to demystify those things. You know, we definitely see as a first, you know, as a housing counseling agency that we play a crucial role in that myth busting, in that de-otherization, and that education. You know, and so our organization recognized that this is kind of a new wrinkle that really all housing counseling agencies need to have. So we've partnered with Next Step to really help us, you know, infuse manufacturer housing education into our education and counseling. And they've been a tremendous resource, and I'd encourage anybody who other housing counseling agencies to engage with them if that's something that you're looking to do as well. You know, I think that there is a you know, another issue that is a tough one that we're hearing from a lot of clients is concerns about time. You know, from kind of how long, you know, it takes to actually to actually get a factory built home, and then also supply shocks. Everybody knows about the toilet paper issues, but I think, you know, back a year or so ago, but it's amazing how many consumers are aware about kind of, you know, broad supply chain shocks, you know, cost of materials going up. And so this is something that we're having to address in counseling. And I don't feel like we always have, you know, somebody like Ramsey would have probably better answers. And so I think as an industry, being able to kind of speak to those concerns are important as well. You know, broadly speaking, you know, HUD housing counseling agencies like ourselves, you know, we counsel over 1 million consumers each year on housing decisions. And you know, we're counseling diverse communities. We're definitely focusing on individuals and households that affordability is the primary concern. And so there is absolutely a, you know, a synergy about you know, housing counseling agencies really should be, you know, have this kind of factory built component in all the work that they do and that we do. So I want to now turn a little bit to some of the statewide stuff that we've been a part of. You know, we've been part of a collective, and really this called a manufactured housing replacement program, and this is being piloted here in Oregon. And there's a handful of aspects that I'd like to share that might be, you know, a model for other states, and really, but specifically, I also want to share how, you know, we as a housing counseling agency can help navigate in this space. Just a quick kind of backdrop. In Oregon, we have just slightly over 40% of our manufactured housing stock, about 60,000, was built pre-1980. And so, yeah, let's go to the next slide here. Yeah, let's actually go to the next slide. So, you know, about 60,000 homes pre-1980. And of course, you know, this is, you know, we all know that this is kind of that, you know, before the HUD regulations, you know, came in 1976. So a lot of these homes need, you know, big repairs, or in many cases replacement. And unfortunately, there's kind of a gap, you know, in financing specifically for people who need replacement. And so, you know, you can't just go get a MH Advantage or an FHA or conventional manufactured home loan for these things. So plus there's the cost of decommissioning the existing structure, lots of other cost of, you know, even temporary relocating. So there's lots of different things. So in response, the state of Oregon passed legislation a couple of years ago, and what it's created is there's now a decommissioning grant, but also there's a subordinate loan that really can help a replacement candidate buy down the costs and and really help fill the gap potentially for a low to moderate income current manufactured home owner. You know, it's an incredibly friendly product, a 0% interest loan that's forgivable after 10 years, and we also have a statewide local CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, that has created kind of a boutique replacement product to be a part of this, to be layered and be a part of this solution. So as you can see, in order to make this happen, we had to bring together lots of parties, from the states to the CDFIs, to utilities, to housing counseling agencies like ourselves, to nonprofits, ROCs, and so forth. And let's go to the next slide. And as we kind of have worked together, part of it is mapping out the capital stack, which I should say can really vary greatly from county to county, and really from energy service area to energy service area. But also map out what is the technical assistance, what's the project management support needed to help a replacement candidate who, let's be real, many of these people who are living in parks and with these pre-1980 manufactured homes are fairly advanced in age, and so having kind of somebody to kind of assist them through the process there's a lot of value to that. And so it's no surprise that both the state and then also a utility, local utility, are taking the lead in developing, in essence, a navigator position that really can help consumers from soup to nuts. And let's go to the next slide. And you can see, with a replacement, because the financing is a little bit more complicated, because you're moving from an existing structure and you're replacing on the same site, there's a lot of kind of components to this, and also there's a lot of parties that need to be engaged, and so really that's the idea, is the replacement navigator can help support the client kind of move through this process. Part of this process is actually meeting with a housing counselor. Of course, I'm a little bit biased, but a housing counselor plays an extremely important role in basically ensuring affordability for the client, kind of walking through their holistic financial picture. So, but that role changes a little bit with respect to a client who's looking to do replacement. And so I think that's why housing counseling agencies need to reach out to organizations like Next Step and to help be able to provide this value to consumers. So traditionally a housing counselor is talking with them about their whole financial picture, everything from their spending plan, their goals, their savings, their credit, debt to income ratios, looking at kind of different available products that are available. But with replacement, it's a little bit different, because at least in our state, credit isn't actually as big of an issue. We're not, the state or even the CDFI is not looking for a specific DTI, but at the same time, that information is really important for the consumer. So as a housing counselor, the housing counselor needs to kind of talk with them about those things, and then also kind of help them looking at what their budget looks like, how much savings they have that can go towards this, but really ultimately, what does a payment look like? And as we're layering these different grants, so let's go to the next slide. As I alluded to earlier, there's a variety of different things that can be used to help build that capital stack, but they can vary based off of income eligibility, based off of what type of park you're in, and of course also based off of where you are, what county you live in, what programs are available in that county, what your energy service, your energy provider is, and what kind of incentives that they have. And so all of this stuff, of course, goes into the calculus of what somebody's payment is. And let's think about a consumer. They're just like, hey, come on, I just want to know what I will pay. And so a housing counselor plays an important role in that. Chris, hold off, check me on time, but I want to just kind of close by talking about a couple of challenges, successes, and then kind of possibly some opportunities.
You're good.
Okay, great. I think one of the big challenges is kind of what I just spoke to, is that at least initially we're kind of, as kind of a state collective, we're piloting, replacement candidates that are in ROCs or that are in nonprofit-owned parks, because that's kind of the best way to start. But of course, there's lots of homeowners that are in private parks. I think another big challenge that we've seen is, like, here's a recent example of there's a wonderful nonprofit here in the state of Oregon that helps community members in a park. When a park comes up for sale, helps that community transition into a rock. But like there was an example recently where their space costs went up significantly, and it makes it challenging to bring on a loan, and especially when you have an older consumer who is maybe a little bit hesitant on they're thinking, hey, I don't need to bring on a loan in my later years here. That's something I've heard from talking to some people when visiting some rocks before the pandemic happened. And I think a big and then of course there's the income piece, is that even with these programs, as much as there's this incredible capital stack, you do need you need income to support servicing the loan. So it's not always, doesn't always work for somebody who's just on a completely fixed income, and yet somebody who has a really high income, it probably doesn't work for them as well. So it really is a good solution for that low to moderate to mid income space. A couple of successes, I would just say, like, one is, we're getting to a place where we'll probably have a navigator in the next year, and that really is a direct result out of a lot of collaboration from, like I said earlier, kind of diverse set of stakeholders. And so there's been really successes in coordination in the meantime on getting clients moving from step one to step two. Another success, and I say this with heavy heart, is that many of you know that the whole West Coast, but specifically Oregon, California, have really been hit hard over the last couple of years by wildfires, and at the state level, they've been able to direct some of this replacement loan money to people who need their homes replaced. And specifically, there was a client just in the last couple of weeks that we did housing counseling for, who actually had an insurance payout of 111. The cost of the double wide that they were hoping to replace was 156. They got 45, or they're in the process of getting 45 in that subordinate loan from the state. And so the math worked out easy peasy. And in this case, this individual, because they had insurance, is going to basically have a replacement without a mortgage. So that's really exciting. Of course, we all know that there's many people who've lost housing during wildfire who, were underinsured or didn't have the insurance necessary to make as successful of a story as I just shared. I encourage all of you, this is a little teaser. I have a colleague from the state of Oregon, Chelsea Cato, who's actually going to be on the next panel, and she's going to talk a little bit more about the state of Oregon's response related to wildfires. One other opportunity that I'll highlight is that our organization, in addition to being a HUD housing counseling center, we're also a developer. We're in the business of developing affordable home ownership opportunities for moderate income households in the state of Oregon. And the model that we've been using a lot is kind of returning to something that really kind of started in the 70s and has gotten repopularized because of the affordability crunch, and that is the community land trust model, where the nonprofit retains ownership of the land, but then still sells the home. And so what that allows us to do is basically create new construction and make it affordable for somebody at 80% of the area median income. The upside is somebody gets to buy into a home, they get the full benefit of building equity. The one difference from maybe more of a traditional thing is that the appreciation is stunted, and whenever they sell it, part of our goal is to help create affordability and perpetuity. And so the price of the home will be always stunted based off of what 80% of the area median income for that area is, which, you know, we've seen, you know, across the country, definitely in Oregon, per capita income, of course, has not stayed in pace with the rise, the rise in the housing market. And so one thing our organization is looking to do in the future is actually, currently our projects are site built, but we're definitely looking at doing factory built CLT projects in the future. And so I think this, you know, everything that Ramsey spoke to, but then also combining it with a CLT model is a kind of an interesting idea for how do you actually, you know, create affordability, especially when we see rising costs in so many different ways. So I think with that, I'll conclude. And yeah, thanks
Ross,
so much. I'm glad to be here.
That's awesome. Ross, a couple real quick questions, but 22 million people live in manufactured modular housing in the country, and much of that inventory is pre-1990, pre-1980. And so there's a growing need, and it only will get worse. There's a growing need for replacement. But one of the things, and you talked about it a little bit, is many of these homes are held and owned and lived in by older Americans, and they're on fixed incomes many times, either disability, Social Security, whatever it is, and they are reticent about accepting another mortgage in their life, another payment in their life. And the role the housing counseling agencies do in helping folks like that to get into stable housing of their own is incredible. And that's on a local level. And I guess I'm saying more of a thank you to housing counseling agencies. But for me, it's really important, if a counselor is going to be talking about housing with a client, that they understand the full range of housing that's available. And that's why I was delighted to hear that you utilize Next Step in orientating your counselors for manufactured housing information, that type of stuff, not as the only answer, but one of the options in the full spectrum of housing and home ownership. So stigma plays such a big role in that. What can the industry do? We've got a powerful industry player in this panel. What can the industry do to help change the stigma and stereotype of manufactured housing?
Yeah, well, I think on the stigmas, I mean, there's the things that we talked about on the appreciation and stuff. I won't talk about that, but I want to go back to what you said related to that senior on fixed income, because I think that is absolutely a humongous hurdle. And I wish I had a silver bullet. I do not, but I'll say this. One, you know, looking at Oregon, you know, somebody who is a candidate for replacement, there really is no situation, unless it was like that wildfire example that I gave, but just kind of that they have an existing structure that needs replacement. At this moment, there's no situation where they can just say, get a free new factory built home. You know, that of course that would be great, but that's not realistic.
Right.
What is realistic is that they would need to get a loan, and so a question is, can you actually build a capital stack that actually mirrors the savings that somebody would actually get from having their new home? So if they're going to be saving several $100s a month because of energy savings, and you can show them, hey, you know, yes, you're going to be paying a loan, but look how much you're saving on energy. And I think another key piece, and I don't think we're quite there in Oregon yet, hopefully we will be in the future, is when somebody sees somebody else in their park that actually has gone through that program. I mean, especially there's so much value in referral of trust from somebody who else, you know, somebody you know, a familiar. And so I think that is a goal, is how can states build capital stacks as close as possible to a place where the homeowners' monthly costs remain similar, It's just directed to a loan rather than to, energy drift that they would have had before.
Yeah, that's great.
Again,
That's
not
a great
perfect,
direction on
but
it.
definitely a framework.
Yeah, that's a great direction. And what I found, there's very few people in a market that understand all the options, down payment assistance, capital stack that would support program like that, and other things, developer incentives and that type of thing, other than a housing counseling agency.
Yeah.
And it's likely that someone that is not involved with a housing counseling agency will ultimately pay more than what they may have had to pay if they don't get involved with a housing counseling agency, and getting our counselors to understand the full spectrum of housing is a real big part of that. So I appreciate it. Pam, do we have some other questions for Ross?
Yes. Well, one of the first ones that came in, and I think this might have been for Ramsey as well. So what is the work being done with local government to edit zoning regulations to allow MH placement?
Yeah, I'll speak for a moment. Sure, Ramsey, I'll go first. And I would say I'm not an expert in this. I would actually say that this is also a good question to bring to the next panel with my colleague from the state, Chelsea Cato. But really, again, what I can say is that our focus as a state so far has been really the nonprofit-owned parks, the rocks, because that allows, really from the lender's perspective, especially from the CDFI's perspective, they need a way without a traditional loan where they have the land kind of as collateralizing the asset. They need the park to be in one of those two models. But I think, yeah, let me turn it over to Ramsey because he may have more to share on that.
Yeah, thank you, Ross. And I would say that one, yes, stick around for the other panels, and I believe there was a fantastic panel yesterday that I think speaks to. Oh, sorry about that. Let the lights turning off on me show our commitment to sustainability. It doesn't detect movements; they darken the room. Anyway, that's actually a fantastic question. It's a challenge that I'm thinking a lot about. I'm actually transitioning out of our marketing department and into a industry and community affairs role, and so trying to crack that nut and figure out what's the best way for us to bring the fantastic narrative and story of our product to local municipalities that have us zoned out for reasons that are beyond my understanding, because I think they're based on antiquated perspectives and ideas of our industry and our housing solution. That's the thing we're trying to figure out now. I'm going to be focused fully on that. And so I would actually, to whoever asked the question, I'd kind of position the question back to you. And if you have any fantastic ideas, I'm looking to build relationships, connect with others that are going to be passionate about the same thing, because I think it is going to take an effort across the board, not just any one organization or person, to change those perspectives and address some of these zoning and regulatory and legislative issues that we as an industry need to overcome.
And I'll just throw a comment in here too, both based on what Ross was talking about and Ramsey, what you're talking about is examples and stories convince others what is possible. And understanding the product and what to expect from the product and how to guarantee for your home buyer a high value factory built home is a critical part of it too. So through education and knowledge, Ross, you talked about that. From an example, Ross, you talked about that. And Ramsey, you and I both know stories sell. And that's a way to convince some of the people that may not understand what today's manufactured housing is. And obviously I'm biased, but that seems to what works for me is pictures, stories, examples. So Pam?
Can I also just add on this kind of the zoning regulation thing that there is absolutely an equity and an inclusion component on this too, because if we look in the state of Oregon, the amount of the diversity in manufactured homes kind of mirrors what we see in traditional single family ownership, and yet as we're looking to the future and affordability, and we need to again, like I said earlier, is de-otherize manufactured housing, because it really is a solution for workforce housing for a lot of different communities of color. That we need more homes, and factory built homes is a humongous piece of that, and access to home ownership for communities of color. It all kind of fits together. So I wish I had more information on solutions, but definitely echo the need for broader acceptance of factory built homes.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
And just real quickly, and Pam, I'll throw it back to you. It's understanding a full spectrum of products. So manufactured housing and modular housing is not different than another product line, and you have a whole spectrum from entry level to a very deluxe premium product, and understanding where that sweet spot is for your home buyer, for your client. That's the real key. And with information and knowledge, you can do a better job for your client. So, yep. Pam?
And we have a couple of more questions, but we're going to move it to Sarah, just so we can stay somewhat on time. And during the next Q&A, we will pull up all of the remaining questions for all of the panelists.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Jarique. I'm with a consultant with SSG Community Solutions, and I have a number of clients and projects that touch on manufactured housing, zoning, affordable housing, and housing finance. I'm going to talk to you today about one project that I'm really excited about that weaves a lot of the themes together that you've heard from the other panelists about confronting the stigma of manufactured housing, of making it more of an ordinary choice or one of the choices that more people have, and making it available to a broader population. And so the project that I've been hired to do is with Next Step to talk about to research how to rethink consumer and educational materials so that training becomes transformative. It changes attitudes and behaviors so that the consumer and the housing counselor as well is willing to consider manufactured housing as a routine option, or confront this de-otherization that Russ speaks about. Next slide, please. The methodology that we've used in this project has been to review existing training materials, both that Next Step uses and other training providers, conduct focus groups and surveys of both consumers and housing counselors, conduct original research to understand and respond to consumer concerns, and to begin to develop and test new content and style. And we're in the middle of the project right now, so these are really preliminary findings, but we found that actually all training is not equal, and you need to customize the training somewhat to different segments of the market. For example, on the second bullet, a training that's offered to any home buyer at all may not be as on point as a training offered to buyers who already know they want to select a new home and are deciding between a new site build and a new manufactured home. Well, buyers of new homes are only 13% of the entire market. So thinking about whether your market, whether it's going to be a relevant and timely alternative for parts of your market are a question. Availability of supply, availability of financing, and in Next Step's case, where they have a unique home, whether the education is around their product or all manufactured homes available on the market. The training the findings have made us question the content, but they've also made us really rethink the style of the training as well. And this is a particular benefit of going through COVID and Zoom life. is that we've gotten a lot more attuned to best practices in adult learning, using multiple learning modalities. As Chris said, tell a story or humanize the education and provide just-in-time availability of more detailed and objective information. We want the training aspirationally to be both on demand and live, and we want training content that can be disseminated widely. And Next Step, I'm not speaking for Next Step, but I will say that Next Step is committed to making sure that the results of this project are disseminated widely, as well as any education we come out of it. Next slide. So one thing we found about the audience for manufactured housing education is that they range, and you've heard a lot of talk about the skeptic today. And the skeptic has a number of questions that you've heard already. What I will say is that it's important not to treat the skeptic as ignorant or wrong. The skeptic has legitimate concerns that can best be addressed by objective research and thoughtful engagement rather than skimming over, well, you know, the issue. There are other members of the audience, and I'm talking about both counselors and consumers, who really are just not aware of manufactured housing at all. And they're best reached by connecting to how manufactured housing can be a solution to their clients' needs. They may not understand that there are inspections that take place in the factory. They don't understand the financing or land ownership issues at all. And that education needs to be targeted to help them become more confident. The knowledgeable audience and the advocate audience have different needs as well, and generally just increase in the amount of detail they need to be confident about able to address each audience's needs. But we found that treating the audience where they're at and recognizing that they may be in very different places is really a major finding from our work. And we've gone from people who've lived in, counselors who've lived in manufactured housing themselves, counselors who have never lived in it, but it's a very common part of their market, to counselors who are convinced that if it's a windy day, the house is not going to be durable, or they have real questions about whether it may appreciate, or even whether it's energy efficient. So there's a lot of benefit to taking these concerns seriously and addressing them head on. Next slide, please. So just as a little preview, we've started to re-engineer the training that Next Step offers. The first picture on the left is an example of a slide from what we used to call MH 101, and we now call Your Guide to Today's Manufactured Homes. And it addresses not positioning them as myths, but saying that manufactured housing may be right for your clients or it may not, and it depends, and we go through different client situations. We've also we're working on an in-depth training for financing for factory-built homes, and in those we've created avatars that can help the counselor or the client themselves relate to what their situation may be and what kind of financing option is available to them. It just walks the student through the material in a much more fun and personal and interactive way. So our next steps in this project are really to finish the market survey and the focus groups that we'll be doing, test and disseminate new educational products. We want to and need to create a resource library where a counselor or a client can pull down information about their specific concern on a just-in-time basis. So if they're wondering about appreciation, but it's after the class has aired, there's a place that they can go and get available studies on that. And finally, Next Step is considering doing expert level training and certification for those counselors who really want to have the mastery of the topic, where this is a major part of their housing market, or it could be, or they're a developer like Dev Northwest. And so that's a whole different audience that we're going to design training for as well. It's an exciting time to rethink the approach. I think you've heard in all the speakers today that there are some real concerns and efforts still to connect the market to the homes. And we think that the counselors and direct-to-consumer education can be very helpful. It's not going to look a lot like what education in this area has been in the past. So we're very excited about the future. With that, I'll let Chris quiz me for questions first.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, I think one of the things that your comments underscore to me is that the paradigm that is shifting is not only for home building and manufacturing and labor, but it's also the way we interact with people in a nonprofit world, in a housing counseling situation, a finance and lending situation. So it just reinforced for me all the evolution that we all continue to go. I was with Next Step and we named it MH101, and your reclassification, renaming that makes all the sense in the world, and just reminded me saying we can't stay still. We have to continue to evolve. All of us do. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And one of the real benefits of the pandemic, I think, is that it's really lifted all of our games around remote education training and using internet tools. And so being able to use all kinds of media to get the education out there is just another thing that the consumer and the counselor are beginning to expect. They don't want to have to show up in a real place at 2 o'clock and attend. There's some benefits to that, and some do, but having alternatives where you can listen to a webinar after the fact, or even better, you can participate in an interactive program on demand is part of that future, Chris, that I think you're alluding to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the digital world in the last 18 months has evolved so quickly and so broadly that we now have more tools than we did 18 months ago. We're using them better. We're reaching more people, and it just reminds me that after the pandemic, after COVID is controlled and behind us in a certain way, we're not going to go backwards. I think that the digital tools that have been developed will be a major part of how we deliver our messages, right?
And just a couple of thoughts with that. I think that the pandemic experience for many people will not let them go back either. So if you've been in your home like me for 18 months and you maybe started doing a lot more education online in order to fill up the time or sharpen your skills or whatever, I think it's become a lot of people who would never have done that now are using their time to do online education. And similarly, home itself has become quite existential. We are more aware than ever of the importance that home is to our security, our lifestyle, our work life. And I think that it's a moment where the solution of manufactured housing will have a more receptive audience.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I get so excited about the potential and the future. I could talk for way too long, and I probably already have. So Pam, I'm going to throw it back at you. Please ask us some questions where we may all be able to answer. So if everyone could just turn their cameras back on, we can be present.
So yes, this is questions for the entire panel. While the digital world has evolved, so many people still do not have access to computers and aren't comfortable with technology. If residents are disproportionately elderly, I believe as Ross and Ramsey mentioned, and low income, how will we make sure that they connect to these resources?
I can start with that. I think that we recognize that we have to deliver tools and training in many different ways. And so having a live option, having things customized for cell phone and mobile phone use, having a resource library that lets you pull down materials, and having that library available in print as well as in the cloud, and in a number of different languages as well, are all ways that we've learned can make our communication more accessible. But it's not easy, and there will be people left out, I'm afraid, as we go to a more digital dependency.
Ross, Ramsey, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would. I'll chime in, Chris. I would echo what Sarah shared there, and I would say that the overarching goal of building out robust and great digital experiences, the motivation behind that should be the same for creating opportunities and experiences for people to educate themselves that are not going to be as technically savvy, and that's that we need to find ways to meet people where they are. And so that's going to mean that we have to develop different solutions and different products in terms of, messaging products, not our homes necessarily, to ensure that people are able to encounter them in a way that makes sense. And I think Sarah hit on a really important point in that we have to think mobile first, because there are a number of communities across the country who their cell phone is their access to the internet. They do not have a home internet provider, and especially as you move out into the more and more rural parts of our country, it's just simply not available. High-speed internet isn't available. But with the advent of 5G and smartphones becoming more and more affordable, I hope that gap continues to close so that we can create great mobile solutions to educate and inform that way.
I would agree.
I'd say yes and yes to Sarah and Ramsey. The only thing I'd add is, this has been a challenge, for our organization, reaching people who are advanced in age. We've seen them more likely, as we try to do new solutions and be more digital, like we've talked about, we try to continue to have, the one-on-one counseling be just over the phone, so that if somebody doesn't want to have to deal with Zoom, they can have a phone call. But I'd also say that, yeah, I mean, it is interesting how, more and more people have been feeling comfortable, using their phone. And so, echoing everything that Sarah said, we need to make sure that the programming that we produce is not just, optimized for laptops or tablets, but really just a cell phone. It really needs to be cell phone applicable. So
yeah, smartphones are a predominant feature on people of all incomes and capabilities. So you're exactly right. So Pam, what else?
Yes. So is it possible for a manufactured home to get both a Freddie Mac choice and Fannie Mae MHA sticker? I'm thinking this would unlock more financing options for first-time home buyers.
Real quickly, yes, the answer is yes. You work with the manufacturer when the home is ordered, and you request that choice home sticker or the MH Advantage sticker at the manufacturer through your sales agent, dealer, distributor, to developer when that house is ordered. Ramsey, anything else on that? The other thing about a sticker, choice sticker or MH Advantage, it survives that first-time owner. It is on that house forever, and the next buyer can utilize MH Advantage and choice in that purchase of that home as well. So, anybody else have anything? Pam?
Awesome. And I think we are at a time. I want to thank all of our panelists and speakers and just give them a round of applause for all of the time that they put in behind the scenes, as well as a very engaging panel right now. Thank you to Chris, our moderator. gonna remind you that we have one more session in the forum going to happen in about 30 minutes. It's reimagining the future of manufactured housing. We build upon all of the lessons that we've learned from all of the past 3 sessions, and hopefully we're coming to a place where we can think about a more equitable future where everyone has the opportunity for home ownership through manufactured housing. Look forward to seeing you there. And thank you again to our panelists.
Thank you.